Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. The BC provincial government is taking what it calls bold action in an effort to stem the rise in youth vaping in the province. The new vaping regulations announced today include increasing the provincial sales tax on vaping products from 13 to 20%, restricting the amount of nicotine in e-liquid to 20 milligrams per milliliter, and forcing plain packaging with health warnings on all vapor products. The new rules stop short of a full flavor ban on vaping products. Instead, BC proposes that flavors be restricted to shops that enforce age restrictions on sales. There's approximately 150 such vape shops in the province, and they would be able to sell additional flavors, though the details on that yet are still a bit unclear, and we're going to talk about that tonight. Many of the proposed changes to vaping in BC mirror the policy suggestions made by the Canadian Vaping Association, which RegWatch first reported to you in October. Joining us today is the past president and current board member of the CVA and the architect of the CVA policy position on vaping, Shaun Casey. Shaun, thanks for joining us again on RegWatch.
Hey, Brent, always good to see you, man.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it was good seeing you down in D.C. For the Vapors rally, which obviously a lot of people were at. So taking a look at what British Columbia has done, because it was a pretty big deal. They had 3 cabinet ministers there, a lot of news coverage on it, and obviously it's a very important issue to British Columbians and Canadians. What does the Canadian Vaping Association think of BC's decision?
Well, we're optimistic. We think that they have followed a number of the parts of our template. Certain areas I'd like to see them go further. Obviously, other areas were a little unclear about the details of. There's a lot of things that we can ask questions, and we see a lot of our members already on social media directing questions to us that we don't have clear answers for. But overall, optimistic.
So what are some of the standouts in your mind that are positive?
Positive, that they haven't banned flavors. We've seen that happening all over the place. So they didn't follow what others in the government in BC were suggesting, which is a full flavor ban. I think that they are clearly, hopefully, seeing that lung illness was related to THC and not to vapor. They're taking a fairly mature stand relative to the issue of youth uptake in their province. They're recognizing that age-restricted stores have acted responsibly in the past number of years, and they don't see them as the focus of the problem. They agree with us that the advertising that's being put in play by Big Tobacco has been, quite frankly, overboard just about everywhere, and the impact that that has. We've kind of stayed fairly light until recently on nicotine restrictions, but we feel that we can live with a 20 milligram per milliliter. I mean, they're even saying transparently. They've really tried to be transparent. I mean, I like the fact that they've had 3 tiers of government, 3 ministries, and they're talking about something very specific, this Quit Now program and education programs that the PST dollars from tax will fund.
So why the nicotine restriction?
Why the nicotine restriction? Well, I think that governments are finally coming to terms with the fact that kids vape for nicotine and enjoy flavors. They don't vape for flavors, and the nicotine comes along as a sidecar. It's become very obvious, even in the United States, that at this point in time, Juul could be unflavored, it could be puke flavored, and kids would be still vaping 50 milligram salt nic. And the data is there.
Right. I mean, I know that when I started vaping, the key thing was the higher nic, to really take care of the 2-pack-a-day cigarette habit that I had. So what would a 20 milligram, look like for adults that are trying to quit?
Hey, listen, when I started vaping 10 years ago, 24 nic was all that was there. I think that salt nic makes it easier to ingest and inhale nicotine for some adults. And certainly, I don't think that it's unnecessary. Unfortunately, it's being abused. and we have to come to terms with the facts. We have a youth uptake issue. We at CVA have not ignored this. For the last 9-10 months, we've had a very specific set of solutions that we've offered to federal government, Health Canada, as well as all of the provinces. And we think that at this time, if a 20 milligram per milliliter restriction is put on it, clearly the evidence right now is how come UK has no youth uptake issue, 20 milligram limit.
Right. So fair enough. Let's take a look over here at the CBC piece, and let me just shoot that over to you, so you've got it. If you want to look for the position that is the most deleterious to vaping, always go to the CBC. You can count on that for sure. So I found it interesting that the CBC leads off with the tax. And that actually is exactly what the Vancouver Sun did too as well, and other outlets. And they're just focusing on the tax as the first thing. I guess they really do see taxation as being a valid tool to make things work. But overall, what I'm reading, that when I read the CBC piece, and I'm just scrolling it here for the audience, I'm not going to do the full readout. It appears that these vaping regulations don't go far enough in some people's minds.
Well, I mean, I think that what Minister Dix forgot is that kids are a lot smarter, and while kids are buying vape, largely they're buying it through social media focuses, and all of this regulations doesn't stop a kid taking granny's birthday $20, converting that into a prepaid Visa card and ordering from China. And that's why CVA has recommended that all online sales need to be restricted to age-restricted postage through Canada Post or other organizations that might provide that service. That literally regulates all of online sales that kids are not going to have access. Okay, so we stop them because we're self-regulating in vape shops and we're acting responsibly. So that's not an access point. So, okay, they limit flavors and advertising and promotion, another necessary point. But we have to plug all of the holes in the dike. And otherwise, they're going to be looking at flavor as the issue, as some have done in the States. Some states have done completely inappropriately. We think that the other hole in the dike that they have to close is online purchases, including Snapchat, okay, Instagram, Chinese companies out there like Fast Tech and things of that that vape is very abundant on. So
let's, for the longest time, actually, it's not the longest time. I mean, what's been going on in Canada has been stemmed from the United States and the original epidemic that former Commissioner Gottlieb announced in September of 2018, and then it just took a couple of months for that panic wave to hit Canada, and then by January of this year, Health Canada was already issuing new regulatory consultations, and for those two major pieces, they are as yet to be delivered. And I'm not actually calling out Health Canada here for dragging its feet, because there's been a lot of developments, including the so-called vaping-related lung illness hysteria. But we are in a point now where Health Canada at any day should be coming out with the results of those two consultations.
We hope so. We have been working, we have a very good working relationship with Health Canada. They're very clearly understanding our proposals to curb youth uptake. But this is history repeating itself. I guess just Health Canada works at a slower pace, needs to make sure they really get it right. This is repeating itself. Nova Scotia and BC jumping ahead to further regulate e-cigarettes to deal with the youth uptake issue. And Health Canada, I'm hoping that they're going to react very soon, but so far we have not seen what their reaction is.
Right. So what's gone on in BC, you're hoping is going to be a template for Health Canada and other provinces?
I would say globally. I hope that it gets adopted into the States. Obviously, as you and I have been talking a lot about USA right now with everything going on there federally, I hope that it could actually be an American state template and a federal template, not just Canada, but North America. We see that North America really has to jive together because it doesn't make sense. Even right now in this regulation, when you have no regulatory framework in Alberta, what stops kids buying from a vape shop just over the border in Alberta with no regulatory framework? Right. So kids are smart enough to buy online. Okay. If they're restricted somehow from one place, they'll buy from another. They're smarter than we think.
Do you find it odd that through an entire 1 hour press conference and all of the coverage that this issue gets, that a discussion about parental responsibility just absolutely never enters into it? And that's not just in British Columbia, that's Canada, that's the US. We just don't hear about it globally.
No.
So, globally. I mean, would this not have been a fantastic time when the government of British Columbia has the entire province and much of the nation's attention on this issue and national media's attention on this issue? And while they spend so much time, obviously it demonizes vaping because the health minister, the education minister, they both specifically made comments that were derogatory towards vaping. The education minister outright said that it's a myth that vaping is less harmful than smoking. And so these kinds of things really, are troubling. So if they can get all of that into their press conference, how it's a glaring omission to not take a moment to say, and all you parents out there who happen to be buying these for your kids, or uncles and aunts who happen to be giving them to your kid, to your nieces and nephews, please reconsider that. Never.
Yeah. And it concerns me as well that if they really don't think out their education program, clearly trying to scare kids these days that are pretty smart and that are Google educated can go on very quickly and find 5 well-established, peer-reviewed things that show that vaping is 95% safer. There's issues though, and that this all brings up, and it really, really concerns me. One is I'm looking for something right now that I just had up a little while ago, and that is public perception. And I don't want them to further mislead the public. I believe it was the education minister that made a reference today relative to vaping and cancer. And there's absolutely no evidence at all, even in the lack of long-term data on vaping, that there's any indication that vaping could cause cancer. And the issue with that is that polling results right now that were concluded in September said that 58% of respondents believe that the people that died of the valley lung disease was caused by nicotine e-cigarettes. Even worse than that is that nearly 34% of the respondents said that cases involved marijuana or THC. They had no idea. And most strikingly, probably, is that only 22% of polling respondents understood that e-cigarettes generally were considered less dangerous than tobacco. And that's the problem that I have. I don't want kids out there scared because, quite frankly, the kids that are going to vape or smoke are going to be driven to it even further. And because they're going to actually learn that they can't trust government and what they're saying. Because I don't want them to say something that's almost propaganda, that a kid could go home that night, get on Google and go, well, what the teacher told me wasn't true.
Yeah, and there's a lot there that you just said, actually, Shaun, and we're going to get back to that. I want to make sure that we take a look here at this one particular portion of this CBC article that I found. It's right at what we're talking about here. And it's this quote here. Who is this? I'm not sure. Oh, well, it's somebody from the Convenience Industry Council of Canada. So this particular quote is obviously a bit self-serving, but the quote says, in fact, Government of Canada data shows that almost 90% of youth who vape or who have tried vaping are getting those products from social sources. online purchases and gray market retailers. And of course, you did absolutely just mention the online. I think that number might be a little bit high, but it's not far off. Like even when we had Dr. Brad Rodew on the show, eminent tobacco control researcher out of Louisville, Kentucky, and he said the same thing. He said the vast majority of these devices that are getting into the hands of underage youth are gotten by social sources. So to just mention social sources all the time and to never speak to those people that are doing the giving, my concern is, after covering this for so long, is that they treat vaping products much like guns. Guns, it's the gun that's bad. And so we just banned the gun. And I'm making no comment here on firearms, though I'm pro firearms. But the fact is, though, is that the demonization of the thing with no discussion on who's using it and all that is really an issue. And that model, the gun model and hysteria over the right to own a firearm, is replicated with vaping.
Absolutely. This is exactly the same progressive mentality towards vaping. They have absolutely gone out of their way to demonize it over their fear of and I've been dealing with this for 5 years now. This isn't new. It has always been government and health ministers' issue is creating a new generation addicted to nicotine. That's their biggest fear.
Yeah, and it kind of drives me a bit crazy. So,
welcome to my world.
Yeah, I hear you, my friend. So, all right, so let's unpack this a bit here. Could have been a flavor ban. And I have to give the health minister, Adrian Dix, huge credit for what he's done here. Devil's in the details. But from what we understand is that for the ubiquity of C-store and all the mass stores out there, it will only be tobacco flavors that are sold, and that includes the exclusion of mint and menthol. So
we don't know. We don't know that yet.
We don't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, but we do know tobacco is what they are going to allow.
Yeah, all they've said is non-age restricted stores are allowed to sell tobacco flavors only. And if a tobacco flavor could be menthol, okay, I don't think you can extend a tobacco flavor to mint, okay, i.e. Juul selling mint, right? I don't think there's a mint flavored, okay. Well, there might be, but then that extends to all flavored tobacco, which includes cherry, banana, pineapple, and grape, right?
Right. And so based on what we've heard, the vape shops that are age restricted, so vape stores, they will be able to continue to sell flavored e-juice.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you were mentioning to me that their candy obviously won't be.
I think that the words that they used in most things were child appealing, and then they further described that to say candy flavors. What definition that has? Okay. Does that mean that I take my let me say, pineapple slushy freeze e-liquid and call it pineapple? Well, it's the same recipe. I've just marketed it differently. That more mirrors what happens in the federal TVPA, where we're no longer allowed to label, promote, market, brand e-liquids as child-friendly. And that excludes desserts, candies, confectionery, soda pop, even marijuana flavors.
And then the plain packaging.
No information, except I think that they really want to highlight, for safety reasons, what the nicotine and ingredients are. So nicotine levels, that's a safety thing. It really doesn't go much beyond what is already part of the federal regulations. And certainly, I hope to heck that is meshed seamlessly with whatever federal regulations. I.e., I don't want to see our vendors out there having to create one label for BC and then Manitoba does something different. And they have to have it. I deal with a situation in Europe where we have 26 member states in the EU, and every single one of them have a different label. So our, lemon recipe has a different label for every single one of those different countries, which is a real pain in the ass.
The health minister also mentioned he batted away. Now, I had to rebuild my entire studio here. Basically, we got back from Washington, D.C., and then on Monday, I spent that editing, and then the last 2 days recovering. And so today, rushed to get everything reset back in here. So I've got video of the announcement here. Obviously, we're not playing the whole 45 minutes. I don't actually have a time input here, so you're going to have to bear with me. We're shot in the dark here.
Yeah, I watched it twice. I think I know a lot of the timestamps.
Well, perfect. Well, so I'm sitting around here at 25:38. I think we might have something here, so let me just play it here.
And Bond.
Hi, Mr. We asked this during the technical briefing, but asked it again. Why not ban flavored products like Washington State, Michigan, and even U.S. President Trump has talked about a ban on flavored products. Why not do that? And were you tempted to do that in any way?
Well, I talked about it. I think what we need here is a regulated market, right? And that's what we're putting in place. So these are severe restrictions. Now, as of now, 90,000 retailers could potentially present such products. And as a result of this, only adult-only vaping stores, which are in the hundreds, will be able to sell any product other than tobacco-flavored or cigarette-flavored vaping products, which is a significant and dramatic change. In addition, flavors that are directly targeting youth will also not.
Sorry about that. I do understand what happened there. I thought I took it, but I guess I didn't.
Why not ban flavored products like Washington State, Michigan, and even U.S. President Trump has talked about a ban on flavored products. Why not do that? And were you tempted to do that in any way?
Well, I talked about it. I think what we need here is a regulated market, right? And that's what we're putting in place. So these are severe restrictions. Now, as of now, 90,000 retailers could potentially present such products. And as a result of this, only adult-only vaping stores, which are in the hundreds, will be able to sell any product other than tobacco-flavored or cigarette-flavored vaping products, which is a significant and dramatic change. In addition, flavors that are directly targeting youth will.
I can't hear you, Brent. You're muted.
Yeah, there we go. So significant. Thank you. Significant step. It sounds like it.
Yeah, I think that they put a lot of thought and effort into this. I really do. I've dealt with a lot of provinces, I've dealt with a lot of states, and I've dealt with a lot of federal governments. United States, Canada, and globally. And this seems to be one that they really thought it out. They feel that they're doing it for the right reason, and the reason is valid. There is a youth uptake issue here in Canada as well as the States. Largely, as I said before, it mirrors, quite frankly, a lot of what we've been recommending to governments in Canada. I think he used a lot of very specific words there, okay? And the word was regulate. I think he also brought up restrictions relative to how he's going to decide who is an adult store. That's going to probably lead to licensing. Already in Ontario, you have to be registered and let's call it licensed with your regional health unit. In Ontario and in Manitoba, we put in place something that defined what a specialty vape shop was, and that was in Manitoba, I think 80, and I think Ontario 85%. That 85% of your sales needed to be focused around vapor products. So I'd like to see them very clearly define what a specialty vape shop is, as other provinces have. And I think that they were just moving ahead as they did before under the Christie government, I guess it was, in
Christy
2015.
Clark, right? Yeah.
Right? Christie Clark. And that was called Bill 14 at the time. And now, obviously, Premier Horgan has said, we can't wait. We hope that this leads the way for Canada. And this literally mirrors what we've asked Canada to do. We have to ensure that age-restricted stores are very clearly defined at this stage. What are the premises that they need to put in place? We've built our own, through CVA, built our own age verification program that can be used in stores with Equifax, a brilliant job done by one of our directors, the owner of Dash Vape, Shai Bay. We've gone to Health Canada. We've created a Canadian postage age verification online product. And we really just need to now define some of these specifics. You know, what is the labeling requirement? What is a restricted wholesaler? What is an age-restricted store? What are candy flavors? And I think that we can work those out. I'm positive that there's a willingness to get this done and get it going right now. And as the national stakeholder for the independent industry, CVA is very excited to get to the table as soon as possible and to detail these things out. So far, I mean, I haven't had much time on social media since this whole thing came out. I was unfortunately involved with some regulatory issues in the States late this afternoon before the show, and jumping into a meeting, okay, in fact, less than an hour into another U.S. Regulatory meeting. My day never ends these days, but I'm positive, Brent. This is a win, and frankly, to those naysayers out there, and God only knows, I have had my haters over the last 5 years as a lead advocate in Canada. I was the guy that started CVA, and I'm very happy with our board right now. We have a very strong board. It's very representative of the industry, large and small players across our nation. In fact, we have, again, finally a French board member who I'm very happy about, and a great guy. So I think that CVA is well prepared to deal with this, and I think that once people really think this through, and if they look at the alternatives, if they look at what's happening in the States, this is as good as it's going to get. We're son of cigarette. Kids are vaping and that we didn't intend to. We're dealing with obviously the bullshit hysteria that CDC has created for me and our industry, and that is what has affected our sales. But my biggest concern, as I said before, is changing the public narrative. There has to be balance where if you're a kid, you don't need to vape. We're going to do everything to stop you vaping. Okay, but if you're an adult and you smoke, okay, as we were at that point with Canada, and that's the most discouraging thing for me. You remember probably the last time I agreed to come onto your show was at the CVE just after we had, kumbaya meetings with Health Canada, and they were publishing productive public education on vaping statements, right? You remember that?
Yeah,
And I
that was
so
just for our viewers to make sure. You were on our show in August, but that was to talk about the NAVA and the North
okay.
America,
Yeah.
right? But the
Yeah.
last time
Sorry.
you did come on to talk about vaping in Canada was at CVE in 2018, and it was a kumbaya series of interviews that RegWatch did. It was a real shaking hands, patting on the back, really, amongst everybody that was at the convention, at the expo. Pretty much thought things were, in a good position now that the TVPA was in effect.
I have no issues with big tobacco coming into this space, but this is our industry that we created. I have issues with the irresponsible marketing and their drive for brand awareness that they're struggling to create to come to it. Initially, they didn't want any part of the vape space. Now they're coming out and trying to get into retail stores every day. I think that they're seeing the writing on the wall that their ways are not being successful. I don't think their product offerings are significant. And I think that they're coming to terms with that they have misstepped, specifically here in Canada. I mean, without a doubt, one thing that's ringingly true is every provincial minister I've ever met with, every federal Health Canada Director General, and you've followed my path, okay, over the last 3 or 4 ones leading up to James Van Loon, okay, who's an absolute rock star. And the reality is that we were getting somewhere. Canada was just about ready to lead in educating adults that this was a safe pathway, right? We use the word gateway. I like to use the word pathway, a pathway to a reduced harm alternative to smoking tobacco. And that got perverted. We had 60,000 flavors for the last 10 years. As a flavor guy, I can tell you the permutations of all of my competitors and myself, and I look at all of the different variations of flavors, and it really tweaks everybody's specific need, right? One person just loves lemon flavors, and other guys love coffee flavors, and other guys love whatever. And we had 60,000 of those for 10 years. Big tobacco comes along with 5, quite frankly, not good ones. Okay, I'm a flavor guy, so let me call you a flavor snob. I don't think that they're very attractive or good tasting flavors. And all of a sudden we have a youth uptake problem. Surprise? Okay, if we follow the rise of Juul, I don't think it was absolutely purposeful. Okay, one cannot deny the fact that they followed tobacco's rule book in marketing in the early days.
So
they used
Shaun, and I'm going to give you plenty of time to pile on
Juul
if need be. But let me just first ask you this, and just to get this in context here from the regulation side. One of the key things about the policy position that CVA has, and that has, as we said, there's a lot of similarities to what BC is doing right now and what you hope will be adopted across the country and by Health Canada and so forth. That position does go against quite a bit about what is now the other side of the industry, which is the Juul and the big tobacco side. And that schism caused, the need for another association to get started, which is VITA. And we actually have been talking with VITA, and I'd like our audience to know that Daniel David, who is the executive director of VITA, is going to be on RegWatch next week. Should be actually next Thursday. That's what we have slated for right now. So barring anything, VITA will be coming on the show, and we'll get a whole hour and whatever time needed to talk through their issues and the things that are important to them. I would imagine that, and let me ask you, Shaun, is that position, are they the losers today?
I don't think VITA is a loser. I mean, the people behind
their position.
Okay, yeah, I mean, but let's just talk about VITA because I want to clear the air. Dan David is a great man. He's given a lot to this industry. Created ECTA along with Jonathan and Shar and John and all of the group there at ECTA, and did a magnificent job even before I created CVA as a trade standards organization. And I think that the people that are involved as directors all have good intent and stand up very solidly in the industry, and I know them all well. Time will tell whether they have a purpose. And if their purpose is to separately advocate for the position of big tobacco or selling through a channel that is C-stores, which is not specifically the purpose of CVA. The purpose of CVA is to protect our members' interests, which is independent retail, small manufacturing and distribution. We do not, and will never collect money from big tobacco. At one point in time, when we were trying to garner enough money for the Quebec lawsuit, Fontem, who is not a member, donated some money, and we accepted it for that lawsuit. But I hope I'll join VITA. You know what? Here's my challenge, guys. You have billion-dollar companies and you have billion-dollar bankrolls sitting there. You know, if there's a purpose to VITA, okay, I'd like to see them drop $10 million into public education to help adult smokers. And that's our common ground. We both have the interest of converting adult smokers to transition to a less harmful alternative, which is vaping. They have their methodology and chain of sales supply, which is C-stores and gas stations. You know, that's great. I don't have I've been in the United States for 10 years in this industry, and big tobacco has been in the industry for that 10 years through Vuse and Reynolds and, all the products that big tobacco sold there. There's never been a clash between the independent vape shops and them until regulation came around, right? And, I will hold my comment, okay, and I will hope optimistically, okay, that the tactics that have been used to dominate the industry, to gain market share, are not replicated here in Canada. And I know them very well, and I watched them being practiced by big tobacco, not through a trade organization like VITA, independently, but they all did the same thing. So I'm hopeful, actually, that VITA has some purpose.
So do you think, in your opinion, Juul, Big Tobacco, the group, they're responsible for the uptick in youth vaping?
There's without a doubt, and that's not me saying that. That's Scott Gottlieb saying that. That's the pollster saying that. Scott Gottlieb came out on Monday on CNBC, and he believes that his stats show that over 50% of Juul sales are to youth. Stats showed, that immediately that they dropped flavors, within 2 months, mint and menthol became their most popular flavors. As I said previously on this conversation, I honestly think that Juul could sell unflavored or puke-flavored Juul flavored pods and still sell a crap ton of Juuls. Right? It's reality. The kids want the high. Right? Last time I checked, pot tastes like shit. Okay, and you choke all day long. From what I remember, okay, in the days.
It's legal now, Shaun. You can admit.
Yeah, well, I don't experience that today. But in the days that I understood it, I remember it tasted like shit, and it made you choke like crap. My biggest concern is, in BC, and this is going to be very experimental, Brent, because you know that the stats are right now that BC has the lowest sales per capita of legal cannabis, except for PEI in Canada, right? And that they have a vibrant black market in the industry, in the cannabis industry in BC right now. So what's happening right now, and I'm very concerned, and I'm reaching out to the government, and those in charge at Health Canada of the controlled substances, to warn them as I have before, because I warned Health Canada 2 years ago with our lobbyist. Guess what? They're going to be vaping cannabis, right? And cannabis oil, is not healthy. And if you have any concern about vaping nicotine, PG, VG, or flavoring, hey, do a little bit of research and look at what happens when you vape oil-based product. I will never sell an oil-based flavor. I have the research that says, that vaping a lipid or a fat and putting into your lungs is deadly. In this situation, this was, you and I both know, this was no surprise to the CDC, you and I have talked about before. Top cannabis organizations, NCIA, Leafly, media, blah, 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 have been reporting on oil lung issues for a long time. We've been following it, watching the marketplace, and we've been seeing these idiots out there in the selling illicit oil products using all sorts of surfactants, from MCT oil to other things, that every one of them is bad. You know, vitamin E is just the next step, and what's next? We don't even know. So it really concerns me. Two things in BC. Without a doubt, Premier Horgan, has been very positive and very progressive about cannabis in BC. He recognizes that he has not been successful. He's trying to get more outlets for retail, and that he has a massive black market issue. So in this instance, I think that they were very mindful of the fact that no other industry in history, if pushed, will create a bigger black market than the vape industry. The entrepreneurs in this industry are young, they're smart, they're aggressive, they have social media and marketing skills, they have SEO skills, they have a whole bunch of skills that the cannabis industry didn't have in the last 20 years. And if forced to, a black market will be created that will be epically, proportionate, and they'll realize that prohibition of any product like this is more disastrous than prohibition against drugs has been.
Yeah, and part of the key thing that the BC provincial government has outlined today is a massive effort on the education side. What troubles me, though, and they say it over and over and over again, is that this is going to be a youth-led initiative. So what does that mean? Well, I'll use the exact terminology that the education minister used, and that was unleashed. We're going to unleash youth on youth.
Yeah.
And that sounds to me like is bullying. Like, really, if I want to write the headline for today, it's the BC provincial government okays bullying in a high school. So that bullying, there's no way youth can lead this initiative because adults have a problem even getting all the information that they need to find out whether or not vaping is harmful or not. So This is just going to be the same anti-vaping propaganda shoved down kids' throats. Then they're going to be turned into active little units to then go and bully their peers.
You had an episode where you interviewed Michael Purley about 6 to 12 months ago. Do you remember that one?
Yep, that was in March of this year.
Yeah. And the funniest line that you had there is, so listen, if nicotine is going to affect brain development, you talked and said to Michael, so explain to me, how rocket sciences were created, because they all smoke at NASA. So, if there was brain development issues, and show me the science, the peer-reviewed science on this issue. I think one of the biggest misnomers is this whole thing, because I have a whole research team at my company. I got more PhDs, and cytotoxicity, blah, blah, blah guys, in labs. And I've looked, and I can't find it. Have you found anything that's conclusive evidence that says, that, kids turn out to be dummies or,
I mean, there isn't, and every major researcher we've spoken with has said that it's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The only thing with nicotine, I mean, let's see, we're getting a little bit later in the show here, so I might as well do it. But I mean, there's a philosophical problem that they've got with nicotine. I believe that they like pot because it's a left-wing drug. And they hate nicotine because they see it as a part of the colonialism and imperialism and slave trade that happened, when North America was founded. And last but not least, is tobacco is native to America. It was Native Americans' peace drug. And so really the white man stole the natives' peace drug and turned it into slavery.
Yeah.
No wonder they hate nicotine.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, clearly nicotine is addictive. How detrimental that addiction is, I don't know. I don't see still why governments aren't as concerned with the higher incident rates in youth in, distracted driving while texting that kills people. And let's add up those numbers. Or, kids drinking, which is way higher and on the increase, and has definite, addiction issues, has definite, disease issues. right? And okay, if we think there's a gateway effect, yeah, if you start drinking young, you're going to be drinking your whole life, right? I never developed a taste for, let's say, Scotch or whiskey, two specific alcohols. I never will. I don't really have a huge attraction to alcohol in general, except the fact that I'm Irish and, you know, God only knows I love my Guinness, right? But that's just DNA, I think. But Brent, I mean, you know what? We're okay. Listen, they have done a better job in BC than most. There's a lot worse case scenarios. I can't tell you how many times I've had to experience over the last 2 months listening to friends of mine cry, okay, as their businesses were extinguished in front of their eyes with no opportunity to fight back. I mean, just like, hey, tomorrow cops are in your store pushing you to take your stuff out. I mean, just these are people that really believed, had good business, were honest, didn't sell to kids, and their businesses are gone, right? I'm watching the ramifications globally, okay, of this hysteria of misinformation. And that's what it is. I really enjoyed one article, I think today, that was in Forbes, and they were talking about a number of issues, okay, well, relative to the White House appearing to reconsider the flavor ban. But they were more importantly talking about media outlets continuing to publish confusing reports about this lung illness, a valley, as they call it. And the reality is that there is a deafening set of misinformation out there that's being broadcast today. I can't listen. I mean, we just listened this week. I mean, they had on every news outlet about that case in, I believe, in Minnesota or Wisconsin, of a kid that had to have a double lung transplant.
Yeah.
They never said cannabis or THC, illicit drugs, once. They never said once what the specific epidemiology for the cause of this illness for this person was. And they're doing that in Canada. They're still pushing it out. I saw multiple times today that there's 2 cases of lung illness, or a valley, as CDC refers to it now. Okay, and nothing tying those illnesses with a wealth of evidence now, from the FDA and the CDC. So when is Health Canada going to conclude reality of what we knew 3 weeks into it, which any epidemiologist could have concluded based upon the evidence of data within 2 weeks of the outbreak in the middle of the summer?
For sure.
Right?
So, hey, just a note, and this is, I think it's important to bring up, and it's for you, Shaun, because you've just done it twice, and this is for everybody out there, because I've heard it off and on a little bit too much. We shouldn't use it at all. If you'll notice that RegWatch has never once used the acronym that the CDC is trying to get the public to use to describe the so-called vaping-related lung illness. So yeah. I would advise you, Shaun, and everybody that if you use that E word, that acronym, you're participating in the CDC's use of language as a weapon. So they are trying to make this disease or illness something to sound authentic, to sound credible, to sound scientific, and that's why they've got this acronym. And so, I mean, it's just all
I agree.
crap,
I agree.
right?
I add to that THC. Okay, you know why they use the word THC? Because only 11% of adults understand that THC is the psychoactive component of cannabis. They never use the word cannabis. They use THC vape cartridges at the best,
right?
Or they just say vape in general, even worse, right? But when they do it, they say THC. I was heartened when the health lady that stood up today, I can't remember her title, but she was obviously a leader of a health unit in BC, and she at least explained what THC was, okay, the psychoactive component of cannabis, because, no one gets that. They think it's like, PGV, we do use all sorts of acronyms, PGVG, right, in this marketplace. THC, that's just another thing that's part of a vape liquid, right?
Yep, absolutely. And just mindful of your time, and
Yeah.
I've got a couple of
Yeah.
questions here too that some viewers have asked. First off, to knock this off, the tax. The concern about taxation always is one where that starts, inching up, and then it starts making vaping products more comparable in terms of cost as smoking. And obviously, the cost savings that you get from vaping over smoking is a huge benefit, and it's one that's so rarely discussed.
Yeah.
And it's one of the biggest reasons why people quit smoking. Eventually, they just get broken by the tax.
But hey, listen, I'm going to hold the BC government's foot to the fire. Our industry is. Okay, the regulatory watchers are going to hold BC's foot to the fire. If they're saying that they're taking this PST taxation this excise tax, and they're directly relaying it, I'm going to make sure they spend it to the dollar. I'm also going to make sure these education programs are completely science-based. And I don't want to see rhetoric like I saw from an education minister inferring that vaping can lead to cancer, because there's no evidence of that as well. So, hey, listen, if they're going to use this tax, I mean, it's a slippery slope. Okay, do I like it? No. Does anybody like it? No, no one's going to say that they like it. Okay, but hey, listen, I'm dealing with 30, 40, 50, 65% taxes. Okay, Massachusetts just announced today a 95% wholesale tax, right? That they've put a bill in for 95%.
And also too, that if you've got products that you aren't supposed to have in your car, they can confiscate your car.
Yeah, exactly. If you have a vape that has not been taxed, how the hell do you do that? There's no way. I mean, it's just so confusing, right?
Well, these people have lost their mind. They're captured by mania. Gadsad, famous philosopher and political commentator out of Montreal, calls it mind parasites, because it's not just this issue. There's also all the other issues that these people, I call them shiny suit social justice warriors. They're not the pink-haired ones. They're the shiny suit ones. And and they're
slick.
Yeah, they're slick. Yeah. And they're captured by the same mind parasites as any SJW, as any social justice warrior would have. You can't explain this kind of reasoning. There's no reasoning and no logic.
Yeah. Brent, without a doubt, what's happened is a press release today. That's it. They haven't published a significant document. Okay. There's question whether legislatively they can just adopt underneath their Tobacco Vaping Product Act a tax increase. There's already been comment in media that they might have to go to legislation to change a tax code. So we'll see. I would like to see published as soon as possible something that isn't confusing, something that isn't incomplete, and provides full disclosure of information on this new regulation. And I hope that there's a wealth of evidence of anything that they push through, because the industry is going to demand it. That they are acting responsibly. They have an issue. I think that they've addressed it the best possible that we could expect. I see it as a template, and I see it as hopefully a government. I've never dealt with an NDP government per se yet in Canada, but I'm looking forward to the experience. I hope to see some open-mindedness, and I hope to see that they still understand what Health Canada does, because this is what they're going to have to merge to. Okay, that this is a pathway for adults to get off the leading cause of preventable death in Canada. Okay, this is a cost that the province burdens specifically with healthcare costs. BC has a very high smoking rate, not as high as, say, Saskatchewan. I think has one of the highest, apart from Quebec, but it's up there in the top 4 or 5 provinces in Canada. There's definitely death attached to tobacco, right. And they were not addressing that. Even the FDA better addresses in all of their rhetoric, all the rhetoric coming from the White House that I've been dealing with, better addresses that, from the FDA and the White House. So I really hope that we see that come out of this province's government, and that we see that this initial published PR conference is followed through with great detail, and knock knock. Okay, Minister Dix. Okay, CVA is here. We have been a stakeholder for 5 years. We represent the independent industry. We have a great desire to accomplish the same goals that you guys have there in BC, and that's to remove the youth uptake issue.
And Shaun, let me ask you, and we are definitely going to be wrapping up here. The last one really on Canada. I've been asked to find out from you what we know about Nova Scotia.
We're going out there right now. Our executive director, Daryl Tempest, is hoping to meet with them as early as tomorrow, and we'll find out. Okay, there's not been a lot of published data as to what they were doing. Just like this, there was no one knew, right? CBC, CTV, none of the media sources had any early indication, except that they've been working on it clearly since March. We had known that they were working on something. We know Alberta is working on something. Saskatchewan's working on something. Remember that one of the premises that we put into Nova Scotia is a 2-year mandatory review. So I'm optimistic that we can further refine regulation right now. The lung issue is not a nicotine vape issue. That's a cannabis issue. And the Canadian government and the provinces selling cannabis and making tax money from it should be responsible to make sure that illicit black market oil cartridges using cannabis oil are properly controlled, because we're not going to allow in Canada, okay, the same amount of incidents of kids using black market drugs and getting sick. And we don't want that to happen, just as much as we don't want kids vaping. So we hope that in Nova Scotia we'll find out in the next week. Our team has been working tirelessly. As a volunteer board, I can tell you to all your viewers, as you well know, having dealt with CVA for so long, Brenton, following us very closely, it's a tireless, thankless job, and it's a volunteer job. And this board is working at breakneck speed, is working tirelessly to achieve a lot of things with a small group of people with a limited budget. And we really hope that we'll get through this whole turn of events. We were happy in the federal election that every one of the leaders looking at being elected as Prime Minister, including our new Prime Minister, re-elected Justin, has said they're going to make decisions on regulation and policy on science-based evidence. And that's what needs to happen. We believe that science is catching up with vaping, as we've been saying for the last 2 years. And science has caught up with the fact that all this lung issue that CDC so inappropriately created such a hysteria over, okay, had nothing to do with the industry that we represent. And that's adults, okay, converting from tobacco and finding an alternative source for their nicotine in a much less harmful. And one other thing, BC said harm reduction a couple times, and I was glad of that too. They were bringing that up because that is the narrative that I want to hear, harm reduction.
And that definitely is, for sure. So, John, just right before the last question, I want to make sure we put our little pitch in to head over to support.regulatorwatch.com and dig into that old wallet there and pull out a few dollars and help us keep going. And a lot of you have done that in the last month and a half, but we still need more. And obviously, we just came back from Washington, D.C., and we killed it.
Yeah, unbelievable coverage.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. One of our
let me make the pitch. Let me make the pitch. Okay.
Well,
every person that's watching this, please understand the impact that RegWatch has had for 4+ years. We are narrating from a professional journalistic point of view, a narrative of the best interviews with the most impactful, influential interviews with the people on the marketplace. There's nothing like RegWatch. I've been a supporter, a diehard supporter with my company. And when we say supporter, I don't care whether it's $5, okay, or $5,000, okay, depending on the size of your company. I don't care whether it's a one-time, I've got a little bit extra money and I'm really excited about or whatever. But you really, really need to support this coverage, guys. This is crucial to what we've accomplished in Canada. It should be crucial again to what we accomplished in the United States. And I know there's a lot of international viewers out there that really enjoy this. I talk to my international clients in Europe all day long, and believe me, this is critical to the narrative of the future of this harm reduction technology, RegWatch.
Well, and thank you, Shaun, and obviously thank you, which I do all the time, thank Flavoured
You
for
don't
being
have to,
an Anchor supporter. Yeah, and just remind everybody, we have 100% editorial control over our content, and because we do have that, we can bring our supporters on and interview them as sources for stories because, that's who we are. We're RegWatch. So, Shaun, let me throw a last question at you here, and this is a U.S.-oriented one. We both just came back from Washington, D.C. It's a total freaking nightmare down there. And, for your business even, right, which I talk about all the time, you're the flavor guy. And, and so it's a disaster. So you've had some close discussions with some people in power. I don't want to let it out. I'll let you decide how much to let out. But what have you heard from who, and what can you share?
Well, I think that, ultimately, the funniest thing about all of this is that between bureaucrats, between state governors that are defaulting on their MSA bonds, and media specifically, the misinformation has literally led Trump to his own static line of fake news affecting his decision. I believe that right now the American marketplace understands that as an industry we represent enough votes, enough jobs that we can't be extinguished. I think they realize the immense health impact crisis that would be created by turning off or killing flavors. As I've always said, kids like them, adults need them. And that's the differential. This industry does not move forward without flavors, bar none, plain and simple. And I think that they have understood that. And I'm really, really positive from my information, and I won't divulge what information I have, but clearly I'm lucky enough to have, a federal legal team, FDA legal team that works for my company, and lobbyists, and direct information as being a board member of VTA, the leading advocacy organization that's really killing it right now. I really enjoyed that Tony interview and making an impact in everything that they're doing right now. They're really killing it and making a difference. And I think that we're going to see a turnaround. I think we're going to see something positive. I am a pessimist at heart. And I love to feel idealistic, and I think we're going to see a big change to this industry, but we're going to see a future to this industry. And I just pray and hope, to all of those small businesses in the United States and Canada, that you're able to make payroll, and hunker down. My biggest advice, I'm on the phone all day long, and I get involved in social media. And my greatest advice is, guys, hunker down, tighten your belts. We're going to go through a rough 6 months, but we're going to come out the other side. So do whatever you have to do to get through, right?
Well, that's great advice, Shaun. And nothing better to end on. And it's definitely, got some hope. It's a message, hunker down. But we can.
There's hope. There's hope. There's hope.
The hope. That's the one question I used to always ask people at the end of an interview. Is there hope? I don't do that anymore. I just ask, is there an action plan? That kind of thing. So, Shaun, thanks again for coming on the show tonight, and wish you well, my friend.
Okay, buddy. Always great being seen you.
Thanks, Scott. Well, that's it for this edition of RegWatch. Before you head off, obviously go to support.regulatorwatch.com and dig into that wallet and find a few dollars. You will be happier for it. And while you do that, don't forget to like us on Facebook. And please do follow us on Twitter. For regulatorwatch.com, I'm Brent Stafford.